Let's go.
Welcome to the Critical Christian podcast. We're your hosts, Dan
and Justin. We ask critical questions about the Bible and provide questionable answers. And after 47 chapters and 48 weeks of doing the podcast, we still can't get the intro right. If you don't mess it up, I will.
That's right.
All right, we're going to be in Genesis 48, and this is the first half.
Did we pull it up or something?
We probably should get the notes open, right?
Yeah.
This is the first half of the blessing that Jacob gives to his children, which is interesting because the first half of the blessing is almost completely dedicated. Clicking random stuff on the screen is never going to pull up the notes. You have to actually open the web browser.
Go. I got it.
Remember, that's where the notes are?
I had no idea where you put them.
And now you're just closing my other stuff that I had open that I was still working on.
Just trying to make it look nicer.
Just mess up every screen while you're at it. All right, give me the mouse. All right, I'll just okay, do that. There we go. And then get the notes ready. Yeah. Yep. A good thing we did this after we started recording.
Yeah.
Right. Anyways, back at it. Okay. So in chapter 48, Jacob blesses his children, but that's kind of a misnomer. He blesses most of them in chapter 49. In chapter 48, it's really just the two children of Joseph that get blessed, which are actually his grandchildren.
Is that right?
Yeah.
What 48 is?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So it's 49. That's the fun one.
Yeah, 49 is when the other children get blessed. It's really interesting. Before we jump into it, is it not strange that the children of Joseph get such like this overweight blessing above the actual children of Jacob?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess we could chalk it up to Joseph still being the favored son, but why would you bless the grandchildren of your favored son?
Well, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
So you said Manasseh and Ephraim got a lot of good blessings. In the future, does it appear as though they did get a lot of blessings? That makes sense. What I'm trying to say is the people who wrote this in the future, were they just trying to make the past line up with what actually happened?
Yeah, most people believe that the Joseph narrative is foundational to the northern tribes of Israel. And the most important tribes in northern Israel were Ephraim and Manasseh.
Okay.
Just like and we'll read it later in this. There's another indication that this blessing is specifically designed to bolster the northern tribes.
Yeah.
And that'll become more obvious when we get towards the end of the chapter. It has to do with the city of Shechem, which is kind of a hot topic in Genesis, because Shechem was like the capital city basically for the northern kingdom for a long time. But in one part of the Genesis narrative, Shechem seems to be cast in a negative light. Remember when Shechem raped Dinah and then the whole city was destroyed?
Right.
And then like 2 chapters later, somehow people are there again?
Wait. The city was named the same as the child was?
Yeah, the city of Shechem was named after Shechem.
Oh, but he wasn't the king, right?
No, he was the prince. His father
founded a city and named it after his son?
Basically.
Oh.
Yeah, it's kind of strange.
I thought.
But then remember when Joseph went to go get his brothers while they were in the town of Shechem?
Okay.
Isn't it funny? And then there was somebody there that told him where his brothers were?
Yes.
The whole thing was a mess. Anyways, long and short of it is Shechem's kind of an important city to the north.
Which is why they made up a story of what happened there, right?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, in one part of the Joseph narrative, they seem to be saying, no, Shechem's a terrible city. But in this part of the Joseph narrative, you're going to see Shechem kind of gets a prominent mention.
You know what I don't like? A lot of things. But it seems to me, going along this line of reasoning, that a lot of at least Genesis was written just to kind of throw shade at the North going against the South and the South. You know what I mean? They're all taking pot shots, and I don't.
Yeah, and against Babylon too. Remember the first 11 chapters really seem to argue against the Babylonian mythology.
I don't know what you're talking about, but the point is,
you've already forgotten all those chapters. It's fine.
But my point is, it's hard to. I mean, it's hard to believe in a lot of this if there is such an agenda that each one is clearly showing. I mean, how are you supposed to believe any of this? I mean, we're not going to discuss this now, but I know in Exodus, Moses, he hit a stone and cursed or something. Remember that?
Oh, yeah, there's two narratives of Moses striking a stone, and the second time, he doesn't quite do it the way he was supposed to. There's some discussion as to why he gets punished, but that's basically used as the reason why God punishes him and doesn't let him enter the promised land.
Right, and I think we can all agree that's nonsense. I mean, it's so obviously the only reason that exists is because the South or North, I don't know who it was, wrote that.
Yeah, my assumption is that they knew that Moses never got to see the promised land.
Or because he just died.
Yeah, of course.
People die all the time.
And they needed to find a reason. Well, why didn't God let Moses see the promised land? The thing that he was...
Well, he probably would have been really old, right?
He probably was really old, yeah.
Well, how old would he have been?
Well, the age doesn't matter. These guys live 150 years, 200 years. It's not a problem for them. So in a time period where people can live for a very long time, somebody rightly asked a question, well, how come God didn't extend his life long enough so that he could see the land? And the answer seems to be in how he carried out the execution of God's commands.
Right, and obviously that's ridiculous.
It is a little bit ridiculous.
So the only reason that's in there, in my opinion, but it's a good opinion, is because all right, who liked Moses, the North or the South?
The Moses narrative, there's some divided opinions about if that's more of a northern or a southern backstory. And I don't know if I have an answer to that yet. I suspect when we start doing Exodus, I'll have a more firm opinion.
But I know they also wrote about his wife in a negative light.
Yeah, Zipporah?
Just because they had something against Moses, right?
Well, I don't know if she's really pictured as being a bad person, but
no.
She's also got more than one name, which is another problem. Just like her father's got more than one name.
Well, I don't think she was pictured as being bad, but I think they tried to make the relationship bad, right?
They did?
Well, wasn't she, black? Yes, she was. I know for a fact she was. And they were trying to make it sound like that was a bad thing. I'm not crazy.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
No, forget this.
I mean, you can Google it while we're recording live. But I don't know anything about his wife, like,
you know what?
Being cast in a negative light because she was black.
You know what we're gonna do? We're gonna scrap this and start over.
No, we'll just keep doing it. It'll be fine.
I don't want to do it.
We can always snip this. Like, we can go on Google and snip part of it out. I mean, we're not going to, but
we're not going to, but
we can. The audience is going to suffer right through this the whole way through.
Oh. All right.
What question are you asking ChatGTP now?
Nothing. I was asking if Moses' wife was black. And it says probably. All right.
Yeah, so the only reference I know of being like someone being with a dark woman and that being like possibly cast negatively is what is said in the Song of Solomon, where most translations say I am dark but lovely. And then she said, because my I think my brothers were harsh on me and they made me work in the sun. She basically seems to be lamenting the fact that she's darker than the other girls, and of course, you know how it is.
Well, that's just probably a tan at that point, right? working in the sun.
Well, yeah, of course, but she's darker than the other girls because she has to work like the men do.
Yeah.
And she seems to be lamenting the fact that she's darker than the other girls. And I'm sure in the ancient world, especially in the ancient Israelite culture, you were favored if you had fair skin.
Yeah.
So,
all right.
But I don't know anything about Zipporah's skin color really being a factor in anything.
Hey, welcome to the Critical Christian Podcast.
Oh, we already did the intro.
I know.
I ain't starting this thing over. Look, we're recording right now.
I know. All right, let's just get into it.
All right, let's get into it. Genesis 48, verse 1.
Now it came to pass after these things that Joseph was told, indeed your father is sick. And he took with him his 2 sons, Manasseh and... Feels like we did this already.
I know. Well, we did just a minute ago. We read it and then stopped and then started again. Okay. Yeah, so Joseph takes his 2 sons to get blessed, eh?
Yeah, I guess so.
So as we kind of mentioned before we got sidetracked, obviously the blessing of Ephraim and Manasseh being first is clearly political, right? Can you think of a rational reason why you would want to give the favored blessing to the grandchildren of one of your sons that is not the eldest?
Why do you say political? What's that mean?
I mean, there seems to be a political motive behind the story.
Oh, the people who wrote the story.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, yeah.
But there's a possible real life explanation that I thought of. Okay. What if this? Not only was Joseph the favored son of Jacob, but it was Jacob that actually saved the entire family in the end.
You mean Joseph?
Yeah, sorry. Joseph was the one who saved the entire family.
Well, I mean, he was, right?
Yeah, so he was the favored son. He saved the entire family, and it was clear that God had blessed them through Joseph. So perhaps Jacob recognized Joseph's, the fact that God was with him and God favored him, and said, okay, well, if God favors Joseph, then maybe I should too. But the weird thing is, well, that may be true, but why wouldn't you give your blessing to Joseph as opposed to Joseph's children? Now, the problem is most answers for this would be, well, because Joseph obviously was going to stay in Egypt where he had all the power, and the rest of them they assumed would be going back to Canaan once the famine was over, even though they all settled in the land of Goshen, right? Mm-hmm. But if that were true, we have another problem, because remember, all of this is being orchestrated by God, and God knew and predicted beforehand that they would become slaves in Egypt for over 400 years, while the sins of the Amorites could be completed. So there's a lot of questions surrounding why Ephraim and Manasseh got the blessing instead of Joseph or the other sons. But there's only 2 logical answers. Either he still loved Joseph the most, or it's just kind of a political fiction.
Or because normally he would have given it to Joseph, but it was clear he didn't need any blessing. So it would be kind of a waste, right?
That is true. He didn't need any blessings, but then again, neither would Ephraim and Manasseh, because they were the sons of Joseph who didn't need any blessings.
Oh, I don't know. They're their own people.
What?
They are their own people.
Right, but they're going to get their father's blessing. And if he's still second in command over all of Egypt, obviously that blessing is going to be enormous.
I don't know how blessings, I mean, from what I understand, they're fake and do nothing at all. So none of this matters. You know what I mean? So
right. Well, blessing. So in ancient world, blessings and curses were like real. Okay, so if somebody spoke a blessing over you, it was something that God was going to work out, like in your life. If somebody spoke a curse over you, as long as it was spoken in the right way, that was something that God was going to do, or whoever God's name was placed on the curse.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why, in the ancient Near East, even today, they still warn people against the evil eye. Because they still believe that curses are real. Like somebody can legitimately utter a curse and it could come true. And that was certainly true of this time period. They believed if you bless somebody, the blessing would become true. If you curse them, the curse would come true. Right?
I have nothing to add.
Oh, anyways. So I don't know. I don't know why Joseph's sons are getting blessed rather than Jacob's sons, because that's abnormal. You don't see that.
Right.
Right. But let's read verses 2 through 4 and see what we can uncover here.
Right. And Jacob was told, "Look, your son Joseph is coming." And Israel strengthened himself and sat up on the bed. Then Jacob said to Joseph, "God Almighty appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan and blessed me, and said to me, Behold, I will make you fruitful and multiply you, and I will make of you a multitude of people, and give this land to your descendants, for you as an everlasting possession."
Right. So one of the things I noticed in this passage, it says God Almighty, which is El Shaddai in the Hebrew. And remember what it says in Exodus chapter 6, I think verse 3 or 4? That I appeared to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, as El Shaddai, but my name I did not reveal to them. My name is Yahweh.
Mm-hmm.
As far as I can tell, if Exodus was written after Genesis, or even if they were written at the same time, it seems to be like this must be what they're referring to. Because I think this is the only time where it literally says that God appeared as El Shaddai, other than I think in the original narrative where he actually appears as El Shaddai. Of course, we've already discussed previously how it's strange that people know that his name is Yahweh before he told them that their name is Yahweh. But I think this is the original tradition that they're referring to in Exodus chapter 6 about El Shaddai appearing to the forefathers. But it makes you wonder if these El Shaddai passages are like some of the most archaic passages in the first 5 books of the Bible. Because you would think if one section of the Torah mentions that, hey, previously, you knew this El Shaddai character, I think it would make sense that in order for them to make that statement, they're drawing from a tradition. And if they're drawing from this tradition, then that means that this text would be older by definition, right? And if that's true, then that means that the Elohim passages might be older than the Yahweh passages.
That's a lot to take in there.
I know that was really exciting to you.
Yeah.
So much so that you didn't write any notes for that section.
I mean, it all seemed pretty self-explanatory, but then you found a lot to talk about, so,
I understand. Let's do verses 5 through 7.
And now your 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, who were born to you in the land of Egypt, before I came to you in Egypt, are mine. As Reuben and Simeon, they shall be mine. Your offspring, whom you beget after them, shall be yours. They will be called by the name of their brothers, their inheritance. But as for me, when I came from Paddan, Rachel died beside me in the land of Canaan on the way, when there was but a little distance to go to Ephrath. And I buried her there on the way to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem. I hope that made any sense to you, because I don't read. So Joseph's first 2 sons are Jacob's when it comes to divvying up the inheritance.
Right.
Now, I guess we already discussed that.
Yeah, we kind of touched on that, yeah.
No, we definitely touched on it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So verse 7 attempts to explain why this is, but then instead just talks about his dead wife. I don't really see any correlation between the two thoughts. He's saying, I want to adopt your 2 sons because my wife died.
Yeah, I agree. It's hard to see the connection between Jacob giving Ephraim and Manasseh an inheritance with Jacob's sons, and also the death of Rachel. I don't understand the connection. It says, "Your offspring, whom you begat after them, shall be yours." So if he has any more children, Joseph, then those will be excluded from the blessing. They'll be part of Joseph's blessing and inheritance, which is kind of strange.
It is,
because you would think if you're handing blessings to Joseph's sons, why not hand a blessing to all of them? But I do think the solution to this is pretty. I think it might be pretty on the nose, which is he doesn't know if Joseph's going to have any more sons. So he's just saying, listen, I can only bless the sons that you got here. You know what I mean? If you have any more kids, it's on you. You got to figure that one out.
Why doesn't he just say, and your future kids, if you have any, will be blessed as well?
Well, because that's not the way inheritances work. Because you don't know, because you've got to divide that inheritance up evenly, or close to evenly, typically. And in order to do that, you need to know the numbers. He doesn't know how many kids Joseph is going to have. Nobody is. But it's convenient, however, that if you take the two sons of Joseph and you add them to the others, you get 13. However, remember the tribe of Levi did not get an allotment of land because they're the priests,
right? And
that gets you to the number 12. So it's very convenient politically that when they're telling the story that there are only 12 people that get a blessing. If they had given the blessing to Joseph instead of Joseph's two sons, then the land would have been divided 11 different ways as opposed to 12 different ways. You can't have that.
No.
You got to get that divine number 12.
Is that what it is?
No, I think that just might be a coincidence.
Oh, okay.
But it is interesting. It's an interesting factor. But what does it have to do with the death of Rachel? I have no idea, because he says, your offspring, whom you beget after them, will be yours. They will be called by the name of their brothers and their inheritance. But as for me, when I came from Padam, Rachel died beside me in the land of Canaan along the way. Then there was but a little distance to go. Okay. Right. What does the death of Rachel have to do with the blessing of these kids?
Right.
I don't get it. It would make sense if Rachel didn't have any kids, and it was like, well, she didn't have any kids to bless, so it might make sense to mention her here. But she did have children. She had Joseph, and she had
Benjamin.
Yeah, thank you.
Well. Okay, I usually expect you to have an answer, so
I don't have an answer for this one.
Can you just think of something?
No, I apologize. I don't know if I have anything. You know what I mean? It's just kind of a strange addition of Rachel's death in here. Although it's possible because of the people who have children with Jacob, Rachel had the fewest. Right. It is possible here that he's saying that because Rachel died and couldn't have any more children, in order to bring that number up, I'm gonna take your two children, right? So now instead of having two children, technically, the inheritance to Rachel's children is a magnitude of 4.
Is that better?
I don't know if it's better, but it's the only way I can see where you can tie this to the inheritance and the blessing, because remember they're going to remember the matriarch at some point of the lineage, not always, but even so it says here there was but a little distance to go to Ephrath, which is also called Ephrathah in the book of Micah. And we didn't talk about this before, but this is another anachronism. The town called Ephrathah was not called Ephrathah until just around the time of King David. It was named after one of the descendants that gave birth to King David. Yeah, I think it was like King David's great-grandmother or something like that, right? So it's obviously who's ever writing this is writing after Ephrathah. And Bethlehem was named after another person that was in King David's lineage, right? So both the names of these towns come hundreds of years after Joseph gave these blessings, or Jacob gave the blessings. So it's kind of hard to know what's really happening here.
So some people think that Moses wrote Genesis, right?
Oh, a lot of people do.
But you're saying that it couldn't be because this had to have been written hundreds of years later, right?
Yeah,
because they're using towns that the names didn't exist when Moses was around, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So how do they justify that?
Well, I don't think a lot of people read the text close enough. Just like we talked about in one of the previous chapters about the Pharaoh that was in charge while they were there, and the text says Ramses, but Ramses came 200 years after the Exodus. There's a lot of like timeline issues and anachronisms like that in the text that people don't really notice because they're not reading it very carefully. But it's one of the very obvious tells that the text could not have been written by Moses, because there's details in the text that were hundreds of years after Moses. And one of the things that people will say, they'll say, well, this is stuff that was just added to the text later.
Yeah.
They're updates, right? And well, that may be true, but I think that's an excuse. When you're saying, well, these are just updates to the text, Moses still wrote most of it. Okay, let's imagine that we're just looking at it without the idea that Moses wrote it. Would we read the books, the first 5 books, and come up with the impression that Moses wrote them? You wouldn't. Everything we read about Moses is in the third person. Moses never says I or we or anything like that. It's never uttered once, right? We know that Moses wrote some things down because it says that Moses wrote things down at certain points in time. But even so, the narrative that we're reading is describing Moses writing something. It's not saying that I wrote this. So I know Moses wrote something, and I'm sure those some things may have been integrated into the cultural narrative of Israel, but I don't think there's any reason to believe that Moses wrote the majority of these stories. He might have wrote like a bunch of the laws. You know what I mean? But I don't know if I don't think he actually wrote the like Genesis.
Okay.
Right? He doesn't claim to. Moses nowhere in the Torah does it say that Moses wrote, anything other than the laws that God commanded him to write.
I just know there's a person I know who does think that Moses wrote Genesis, and I asked them. I said, well, or and actually, whatever. I said, did Moses write about his own death? And they didn't have a response, and I was just thinking, this is it's a pretty obvious question.
You would think.
Did you never think of that even?
No, well, they're not reading it, and that's the other thing. The majority of people that believe in Mosaic authorship, they haven't read the text. They just haven't. I know very few people who have actually intently read the text and still believe that Moses wrote it. And it's for obvious reasons, because you can see there are things happening after Moses had been dead for hundreds of years. And it says silly things like Moses was the most humble man to ever live. You think Moses wrote that? And you've got like in the story of King Og of Bashan, it talks about how his bed is still located in a particular city until this day.
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean until this day? If Moses is writing it, he's saying his bed's over there. We just seen it. You know what I mean?
Right.
There's a lot of things, and it keeps talking about stuff that happened on the east side of the Jordan River as opposed to the west side. So the author is writing from the western side of the river, talking about things that happened on the eastern side of the river. But Moses never crossed the Jordan. He was on the east side of the river till the day he died.
Okay.
So there's just so many clues, and the king list of the Edomite kings we read earlier in like Genesis, what is it, 36 or something? The king list says that here are the kings of Edom up until Israel had a king. What do you mean until Israel had a king? That's hundreds of years after Moses died. Moses didn't have any idea that Israel ever had a king. That's crazy. So there's just so many parts where like there's no way Moses wrote it. And of course, traditionalists will be like, well, Moses was prophetic. Right. Yeah. So Moses knew the future. He was prophetic. He also used anachronistic names of towns. Yeah. And he wrote about himself in third person. Would you accept that claim about any other book? You wouldn't. No. But they'll bend over backwards to say it about this. And the fact of the matter is, it doesn't matter if Moses wrote it. Mm-hmm. If it's inspired by God, it doesn't matter who wrote it. Right. Right? Am I wrong here? Anyways, I don't see why people are so tied to the Mosaic authorship thing. Right. Yeah. I didn't believe it even when I was a conservative. It didn't make sense. Anyways, what were we talking about? I think we got sidetracked on a side quest.
We'll keep doing that.
On verses 5 through 7. Let's read the next section.
All right.
For 48, 8 through 11.
All right, let's see. Then Israel saw Joseph's sons and said, "Who are these?" Joseph said to his father, "They are my sons, whom God has given me in this place." And he said, "Please bring them to me, and I will bless them." Now the eyes of Israel were dim with age, so that he could not see. Then Joseph brought them near him, and he kissed them and embraced them. Then Israel said to Joseph, "I had not thought to see your face, for in fact God has also shown me your offspring." I thought this because it was going in a completely different direction. Like, remember when Isaac blessed Jacob, and he also couldn't see, right? So,
right.
Yeah, that's why it's funny. I'm like, yeah.
It gave you the impression initially that there might be another trick.
Right, yeah.
But in this case, there wasn't a trick.
No.
In fact, it kind of seems to be a miracle. And we'll see in a second, because he's able to, even though his eyes are weak, he's able to purposely put his hand on the particular child that he wants to give the appropriate blessing, even though it's not the appropriate child, according to Joseph. But anyways, I had a question. It says, when Israel saw Joseph's sons and said, "Who are these?" I'm confused about why he doesn't know who they are. Didn't he summon Joseph? Previously in the chapter?
Well, I mean, I don't know if his children had to be there. He was giving out the blessings, right?
It says, "Now it came to pass after these things that Joseph was told, 'Indeed, your father is sick.' And he took with him his two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. And Jacob was told, 'Look, your son Joseph is coming to you.'" Right? Mm-hmm. And then he says, "And now your two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh." Okay, so Joseph is there. Mm-hmm. He knows who Ephraim and Manasseh are. Mm-hmm. And then it says, "Then Israel saw Joseph's sons and said, 'Who are these?'"
Well,
what do you mean, who are these? The only two sons that he's got.
Well, maybe he never met his sons before?
Maybe. I hold that thought for a second. Check real quick.
All right, I'm holding my thought. So, nice weather today. I'm not good with small. I mean, it's possible that he was just unable to see, and so he just wanted to make sure it was them, right?
Could be. I was looking for my copy.
I know you have an answer that you prefer, so which one is it?
Well, I was looking for my copy of The Bible with Sources Revealed by Richard Elliott Friedman.
Yeah.
Because he outlines in the narrative what part was combined from the North and the South.
Okay.
And my thought is that the reason why this strange thing exists is because they're combining the narrative from the North and the South.
Okay.
And it just happened to be one of those places. And of course here says Israel instead of Jacob.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Well, that's a giveaway right there.
Yeah, it kind of seems like the narrator or the story is now switching narrations.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So my thought is that this is an artifact of the combining of the text.
I mean, that makes the most sense. I'm just saying there are other things that make less sense that could be true.
That's true. Yeah, there could be. But anyway, so he says, who are these? And Joseph said, these are my sons whom God have given me in this place. Really interesting. This place is really important. In some of the previous texts, you'll see the word makom being used in a bunch of the either the Alwist or the Elohist text. I forget now. You'll see it again. It's in the narrative of when when Abraham and Isaac has the near sacrifice.
Okay.
And it's also in the narrative of where Jacob goes to Bethel.
What is makom?
It's a Hebrew word for place, but typically it's more often used to refer to like a sacred place. Right?
I don't know. Let me see.
This is, yeah, go ahead.
God has given me in this sacred place.
No, it doesn't say.
I know, I'm adding that.
Oh, you're adding that. Of course.
They are my sons whom God has given me in this sacred place. Okay. What am I taking away from this?
No, I'm not saying that you need to interpret it as referring to a sacred place. Oh, what I'm saying is it's a key word that gets used by, I believe, the Elohist editor.
Okay.
It's just one of those words that when you hear it, you're like, oh, this might be from the Elohist editor. Okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just like when you see Israel instead of Jacob.
Right.
Right? That's all I'm saying.
Except this one is harder to figure out.
Yeah, this whole thing is really tricky, actually. That's why I was looking for Richard Elliott Friedman's book, because he had a really good outline of this chapter. But since I can't find it, I guess it's no good for anybody right now.
Did I read that one? That book?
No, but you should. Yeah. It's cheap. You can get it for like $12.
Yeah, but it's got like words and paper, right?
It's got words and paper, but you don't have to read it straight through. It's just the Bible passage, and then he colors the words in different colors, so you can tell which editor is putting which together.
Oh, that's neat.
So you don't actually have to like read it. In fact, you can just replace your Bible with it. You can just read that instead of your Bible.
You're gonna replace the message with that?
Yeah, I would.
Yeah, no.
I mean, I would replace the message with dog farts. I mean, that thing's just, that's a waste of paper.
You're just silly. All right. Message is fine. All right. All right, 48, 12 to 14.
Yeah, let's read 12 to 14.
So Joseph brought them from beside his knees, and he bowed down with his face to the earth. And Joseph took them both, Ephraim with his right hand toward Israel's left hand, and Manasseh with his left hand toward Israel's right hand, and brought them near him. Then Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it on Ephraim's head, who was the younger, and his left hand on Manasseh's head, guiding his hands knowingly. For Manasseh was the firstborn. So I wouldn't say this passage is confusing so much as it's just like, why include it? Like, why include all the little descriptors? Why did Jacob guide his hand knowingly? That's such an odd word here, isn't it? I mean, I get he's going to bless the younger with more stuff. What a twist.
Right.
All right, let's get on to this thing you want to tell me.
All right, so here's the book. I've found it on the bookshelf. The Bible, Sources Revealed, Richard Elliott Friedman.
Weird place for it.
I know, right? He's suggesting verses 1 through 2 are from the Elohist. And that's where the name Israel is used. And then verses 3 through 7, where it says Jacob, comes from the priestly source. Now, here's the interesting thing. The priestly source also came from the north. So both the Elohist and the priestly source are northern sources, but they have different names for Jacob and slightly different concerns.
Okay.
So that explains. So in verse 8, we see it switch over to the Elohist source, and it stays that way until the end of the chapter. So where it says this doesn't actually help. Let's see, because according to Richard Elliott Freeman in verse 2, according to the Elohist source, it says, here your son Joseph is coming to you, and Israel fortified himself and set up in the bed. So he knows, at least according to Elohist, what's happening here. But the mention of the two sons does not happen in the Elohist source. That happens in the priestly source. Let me see here. Yeah, and now your two sons, who you were born into your land, the land of Egypt, by my arrival, so on and so forth. That's by the Elohist source. So when they combine the Elohist source and the priestly source together, that appears to be an artifact of combining those two sources. That's what we got from Richard Elliott Freeman. That's
good to have that book. You already said it was an artifact, though, right?
Yeah, I just wasn't sure if of which sources.
But now you're saying for sure.
Now I've got a pretty good confidence of the sources. Yeah.
Nice.
So on verses 12 through 14,
yeah,
the purpose of the switching of the hands.
Yeah.
Well, as we already mentioned, it's weird that he's so blind that he can't see what's happening, but he knows enough to do this, right?
Yeah.
But what's happening here, I think, is really strange. And I hate to admit it, but in order to explain it, it debunks like a theory that I kind of previously was trying to make a case for. Not today, but
okay.
I've been kind of working on it for like the last couple of years. And my theory is that Israel, the northern kingdom, came first, and Judah, the second kingdom, the smaller kingdom, came second. And a lot of passages in the Bible about the second son superseding the first son is like a hidden narrative describing how the second kingdom will overtake the first kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
And for a long time, I thought this is part of that narrative, saying, well, this must be from the Yahwist, who was from the southern kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
But if we take Richard Elliott Freeman's sources appropriately and we attribute it to the priestly class, I'm sorry, to the Elohist class. Let me double check. We're in verse 12 and 14. Yeah, 12 and 14 are considered the Elohist for northern tribes. That kind of debunks my theory a little bit, unless it's just a coincidence. Because in this case, it's the younger son that gets the blessing as opposed to the older son of Joseph. But anyways, I think the reason for this is because Ephraim, again, it's political. Ephraim was the most prominent tribe within the northern tribes.
Well, so you think this didn't really happen?
No.
It was just the later writers wanting to prophesy.
Yeah, because the euphemism throughout the Old Testament for the northern tribes is just Ephraim. So, for example, in Isaiah chapter 7, where it talks about the virgin birth and whatnot.
I don't think that's what euphemism means.
What's the euphemism mean?
Well, it's like to use a more better word for something.
Oh.
Right?
I thought it just means you use a word outside of its original context to refer to something else.
I think so.
Can we say it's an idiom?
No, I'm almost certain that's
Well, anyways, it's a code name for the northern tribes.
Is that Schenectady? Is that what it is?
I don't know. You're the English major.
Yeah, I think it is.
I thought Schenectady was like a town in Connecticut.
Well, it could be two things. Also, that was New York. All right.
Oh, New York, sorry.
All right.
But yeah, in Isaiah chapter 7 at the beginning, it says Ephraim has made an alliance with Aram, referring to the northern tribes of Israel under the banner of Ephraim, the greatest of the northern tribes.
You know what I think is weird?
Mm-hmm.
So Ephraim is kind of a big deal, right?
This is a really big deal.
So you certainly wouldn't name your child Ephraim, right?
Why not?
That's an ugly name, isn't it?
Well, it might have been beautiful in ancient Hebrew.
Well, that's my question.
Ephraim is a beautiful name.
I mean, a lot of people are named Joseph.
I mean, it's better than Melchizedek.
Well, yes, maybe. I'm not sure.
I don't know. There's a lot of rough names in the Bible.
They made
to be
a
honest.
joke about it on Family Guy, and so now that's all I can ever think about.
Oh, Ephraim? It's not a terrible name.
All right.
I think we in English we dog on it because it just reminds you of like frying food.
Maybe.
You know, it's not really, you know.
I just always think it's weird what names become really popular in English and what names you never hear from again. You know?
That's true. Maybe I'll have a child name him Ephraim.
Don't do that. All right.
I mean, Manasseh's not great.
It's better. Yeah, I mean, it's better.
I don't know. I don't know.
I had a child named Messiah when I was subbing. Messiah.
One of my old neighbors named her kid. Her first daughter was named Beauty. Beauty. And then she had a son. I'm not joking. Named him Gorgeous. Hold on, it gets worse. Then she had another daughter. And rather than coming up with something original, she named her Beautiful. So it was Beauty, Gorgeous, and Beautiful.
You know, I honestly thought you were going to say he was called Beast.
I don't know what they were called in school, to be honest.
Yeah.
Probably names.
Yeah.
I kind of felt bad for the kids. They were good kids, though. They were nice.
I never referred to him by his first.
Oh.
The Messiah child?
Oh, I never talked to him. They were cooking crack in the kitchen.
Okay.
And they made it a purpose never to talk to their neighbors. I tried when I first moved in.
Yeah.
I tried to when I first.
Talking about here?
Yeah, when I first moved in, I tried to introduce myself and get to know them, and they refused to talk to me. Basically, they get off my property. And then finally, I talked to one of my other neighbors. Like, yeah, they don't talk to anyone because they're making drugs in the kitchen. They don't want people coming over or getting to know them or anything like that. Then there was a big explosion in the kitchen. The cops came over, and well, everyone knew what was happening. They were making crack in the kitchen.
Did they move away?
Yeah, the house got repoed.
The house?
Yeah. That's why there's new owners in it now.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. Hey, don't make crack in the kitchen. Bad things happen.
I don't think houses get repossessed, right?
Yeah, they do.
Oh no.
Well, if you don't own it,
maybe foreclosed on or something.
That's true. Foreclosed is the proper word for it.
If you repossess it, you're gonna have to like drag it away somewhere.
I mean, it's the same thing though. It's repossessed by the bank,
I understand.
But it's foreclosed is the proper word for it. You're right.
I like words. Okay.
Did you hear what I said?
You said I was right.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
All right.
That feel good, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, I'm right so a few times.
You have to take the wins when you can get them.
Even with the really sad win. Yeah. All right, 15 to 16. And he blessed Joseph and said, God, before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac.
You okay? Are you having a stroke? You all right?
Which says again, God, before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has fed me all my life long to this day, the angel who has redeemed me from all evil, bless the lads. Let my name be named upon them, and the name of my fathers, Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth.
Yeah. Interesting invocation of the angel here.
I mean, he must be referencing the one that he wrestled, right?
Yeah, you would think so. right? 'Cause it says, the God who fed me all the days of my life until this day. Then he says, the angel who redeemed me from all evil. Wait, what?
I mean, that's all it can be. Right?
No, I mean, how?
Because God isn't an angel.
Right, but how did an angel redeem him from all evil?
Well, I mean, I know after he did the wrestling thing, that's when he was called Israel, right? So that's when he officially started to whatever.
That was kind of a turning point in his life.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I wonder if Jacob views, or even the narrator views, that story as like a rite of passage.
I mean, it was. I thought that was.
It kind of is.
I thought that's what that was going.
Right.
That's why he changed his name after that, because he's like a new person.
Right. So not just a rite of passage, but leaving the past in the past. You know, that's what you might say, a redeeming from all past evils.
Right. Yeah.
A new me, new day, new me.
Right.
Right. I could see that. Yeah, I'd go for that, actually. Otherwise, the passage doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Well, no. I mean, honestly, it still doesn't make sense because he wrestled with an angel. That's ridiculous to even think about. But
right. Except it doesn't say angel in the passage.
I know, but we have no idea what it would have been.
I know.
I
mean, no one really knows.
I mean, I'm fairly certain it was just somebody just added that on there to be silly.
No, Hosea said it was an angel. The prophet Hosea.
Well, then, I mean, there you go. That's confirmation right there. But that's not a joke. I mean, that's confirmation. That's what it has to be then.
Yeah.
You're going to say it's anything.
Well, the problem is this, to me, that was always a difficult passage, because that story shows up elsewhere in ancient Near Eastern stories.
Oh, really?
Where you have, you remember the old, was it, is it a Grimm's fairy tale or another fairy tale where they got the river trolls under the bridge and you have to like request passage to cross over the bridge or whatever?
Yes.
Okay, that stems from an even older trope where there are like these river demons, and you have to earn your rite of passage to cross over the river. By crossing over the river, you either one have defeated the river demon, or the river demon has allowed you passage, maybe because you're so awesome and righteous, and you're just, by virtue of your awesomeness, he lets you pass. That trope shows up in the ancient Near East a number of times. And so when I read the river crossing of Jacob, it's hard for me to take it seriously, because it sounds to me like they're just using an old trope and applying it to Jacob, as saying, well, this is the time in his life when he had his rite of passage, and we're declaring it by using this old trope.
Okay.
And I don't know if the original author meant it to be completely serious, or if he was just reusing an old trope.
Honestly, that sounds very likely, because I know I've read a lot of things in the Bible, and a lot of it are hard to believe. But this one isn't just hard to believe; it's
silly,
stupid,
because
silly, ridiculous.
How do you overcome a divine being?
How do you wrestle like all night?
Right.
The whole thing is just.
I mean, wrestling in general. Okay, so I wrestled in school. There's a saying in wrestling at high school. It's called 6 minutes of madness. So at the end of a 6-minute wrestling match, you're near death. You cannot wrestle for 12 minutes. You cannot wrestle for an hour. You're not going to happen. You're going to die. The art of wrestling is not like other sports. It takes every ounce of you, because you're literally like fighting for your life, basically, right? Mm-hmm. And so there's a reason why wrestling matches are always very, very short. So the idea that Jacob wrestled for his life with a divine being to the break of dawn, to me, is just silly. Anyone who's ever wrestled will tell you that there's no way that happened. Mm-hmm. So to me, the story sounds mythological. It's trying to make a theological.
You know what? Honestly, I would believe it if the author meant for it to be like Like he wasn't trying to persuade people that it actually happened. Because I mean, if this was a common trope, people would be like, "Oh yeah, I get it, right?" You know what I mean?
Yeah, I actually think that's what's happening
I think
here.
it's just that in modern day, we of course don't know about this, and so we're like, "Well, it must have been real."
Right, and same thing with the putting Moses in the basket and floating him down the river to be taken up by somebody from the palace. Same exact thing was already predated Moses by Sargon. King Sargon was born of a poor mother who couldn't take care of him, and he wouldn't have survived if he had stayed with her. And she put him in a basket and floated him down the river. And the gardener of the king's palace took him out and cared for him and raised him up and taught him how to be a gardener in the king's palace. And while he was there, he got an education and he rose to the ranks of a king. Sargon is actually one of the greatest kings in all of the history of ancient Babylon, or Babylon and Akkad. Because
so the authors would have known about him.
Yeah, if you're reading the story of Moses about being placed in the basket, there's no doubt in your mind that you didn't know the narrative of Sargon. You would have connected it.
You would have to. I mean, contemporary readers would have to go, "Oh yeah, I know what they're doing."
Yeah, contemporary readers would know what's happening.
Just making a connection between. Yeah.
The problem is when you read it in later cultures,
right,
and you don't know that connection, and we see that sometimes with the like Bible writers who are looking back at the ancient texts. You can see, like, when Ezekiel goes back and reads the Pentateuch, the first 5 books, there are parts where you can see Ezekiel wrestling with, I don't know if Ezekiel really knew what was happening here. Like, there's a passage in Ezekiel where Ezekiel thinks that God is literally commanding the Israelites to commit child sacrifice. Something that God said in the book of Jeremiah has never even crossed my mind. So there's definitely a disconnect when you put a couple hundred years, even 1,000 years between narratives. The audience loses track of what's being said, and it's even worse when you put 2,000 or 3,000 years between them, like the era we live in.
Yeah.
Right. But I think the original audience of the Jacob wrestling the angel, I think they would have known that this is a common ancient Near Eastern trope, and this is just a rite of passage. He's a new person now. Right?
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. All right. 1718. Now, when Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand on the head of Ephraim, it displeased him. So he took hold of his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. And Joseph said to his father, "Not so, my father, for this one is the firstborn. Put your right hand on his head."
Yeah. Seems a little bit late now to move the hands, since he's already given a blessing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if Joseph could have stopped him in the middle of bed and, whoa, you got the wrong guy, you know?
Yeah, so that was my question. Did Joseph interrupt him in the middle of the blessing, or were there 2 blessings? Or maybe there's more to the narrative that we're not told. Maybe there was an initial blessing, I don't know, and then something happened and he paused. And then while they were paused, Joseph's like, "Actually, Dad."
Right, yeah.
Now that we're, now that you had a good sneeze, you put you put the wrong hand on the wrong head here,
Right.
I could see that happening in real life. What are you going to do? Interrupt your old papa who's blind while he's giving him blessing? You're like, the old guy doesn't know any better. He's confused. But then you get that break and you're like, well, now that we got a break, maybe, maybe we'll sort this thing out properly, just to make sure the right person gets the right blessing. You know what I mean? And then Jacob surprises everybody and is like, no. I meant to switch the blessing.
Well, shocking.
That is a plot twist.
Yeah, sure is.
Right? The old senile man knows what's going on.
Yeah. 1920. But his father refused and said, "I know, my son, I know. He also shall become a people, and he also shall be great. But truly his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his descendants shall become a multitude of nations." So he blessed them that day, saying, "By you, Israel, the nation, not the person."
So sorry, I added that.
Oh,
I meant to change the color of that so you knew that parentheses was mine.
okay.
Sorry, sir, go again.
He was, yeah. All right. So he blessed them that day, saying, "By you, Israel, will bless, saying, May God make you as Ephraim and as Manasseh." And thus he set Ephraim before Manasseh.
Right. But that's why I added the parentheses there.
Yeah.
So he blessed them that day, saying, "By you, Israel, will bless, saying, May God make you as Ephraim and Manasseh." So he's basically saying, shall not Israel, the nation, be as blessed as the great tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh?
I mean, I took it to mean that Jacob knew this was confusing. And so he's like, let me just clarify.
Yeah. But like, okay, so I had a side question though, okay?
Mm-hmm.
What is happening in the mind of Manasseh here? Okay, so he goes in. He doesn't, when they arrive, he doesn't know he's getting a blessing. He doesn't even know why he's there, right?
Well, he knows that his grandfather's dying, right?
Well, he knows his grandpapa's dying. He knows that there's going to be blessings handed out, but he's old enough probably to know that it's his father that's going to get the blessing.
How old is he?
We don't know. We don't
like
know.
3?
We don't know.
13?
He's old enough to get a blessing.
Well, you can give a blessing to a 1-year-old, right?
It's hard to say.
All right. Keep going.
Anyways, they show up. Manasseh doesn't know he's getting a blessing today until he arrives. So he goes there. He learns he's going to be getting a blessing. The first blessing, to be exact, because none of the other children have been blessed yet. And he's the eldest of the 2 sons. So he goes in not knowing anything, then realizes, oh my God, I'm getting the first blessing. I'm the man. Like, I'm getting a double portion. I'm getting the father's prime blessing. Like, this is a really big deal. And then in the middle of the blessing, it gets taken away from him and handed to his brother.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't that be a crazy ride to be on?
I mean, for all 5 minutes, man, right?
Well,
I can't imagine it took that long.
Well, I'm not saying it took long. I'm saying that the blessing is like a huge thing, though. It's not like, okay, imagine you went in because your grandparent was passing away, and their millions of dollars are going to be inherited, and you know that the person who gets the first blessing is going to get double. Let's say everyone's getting $1 million except for the first blessing. The first blessing gets $2 or $3 million.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you go in thinking you're not getting anything. Your father is going to get $1 million, and Reuben is going to get $2 million. So you go in and you learn, oh my gosh, I'm getting $2 million. That was unexpected. And then in the middle of getting your blessing of $2 million, $2 million gets taken away from you and given to your brother, and then you get like what appears to be $1 million.
That's still not that bad.
No, it's a great gig. I'm just saying it's a big old, a lot of emotions happening there.
I don't know. It depends on how old he was.
Well, yeah, if he's old enough to really understand what's happening.
Or if he's old enough to be mature enough to not be, jealous.
Well, also, if he's old enough that he's already got a bunch of his father's money since he's second in all of Egypt.
Yeah.
Right? We don't really, I'm just saying, the range of emotions that the children of Joseph must have been feeling during the whole experience, I think would have been pretty wide, because there's a lot of things happening that no way they could have expected walking into that room.
I like to believe that the children of Joseph were very good children, because we know Joseph was a very good person. I assume he was a good father, probably tried to raise his children right. I
would agree, yeah.
And so I have to presume Manasseh was never like, wow, that's cold-blooded,
Yeah, I mean,
he was just like, well, Jacob, he's wise. I believe in God, blah, 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 blah. This is for the best.
Right. Unfortunately, we don't really learn much about Ephraim and Manasseh from the text.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, they're super important. Also,
which is kind of weird.
Why is
that important?
I know it's weird, but not important. I agree. Why is Jacob talking about himself in the third person?
Doesn't he always do that?
Says, so he blessed them that day, saying, so this is Jacob speaking the blessing, and Jacob says, by you Israel will bless, which means either he's talking about himself in the third person, or he's speaking about the future nation of Israel.
He is speaking of the nation, because it's in parentheses.
I know, right? That's why I put that there.
Yeah.
So one of the things is true. He's obviously talking about the future nation of Israel, which is why this is such a political text. The whole blessing narrative is a political text written many generations after they've already settled in the land. And it seems to be pretty clear in the blessing, right? Because he's not going to speak about himself in third person in the middle of a blessing. It's just not something that would happen, right? And it actually becomes, it will become more obvious as we read the next couple of verses that this is talking about a future people group. But
all right,
knock everything over here.
Let's 21 to 22. Then Israel said to Joseph, behold, I am dying, but God will be with you and bring you back to the land of your fathers. Moreover, I have given to you one portion above your brothers, which I took from the land of the Amorite with my sword and my bow. He's still playing favorites, huh?
Yeah.
I don't even know what he's talking about. Taking something from an Amorite?
Yeah.
Speaking of inheritance, did they like dictate their wishes to someone official or something? I find it hard to believe Jacob just dies and Joseph is like, yeah, so Dad's sad. And then everybody is like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, yeah. I mean, you're the second youngest. That would make sense. You know what I mean?
Right.
Wow, you wrote a lot of stuff here.
I know. So there's a couple things maybe we should address.
All right.
The first thing is it says, which I took from the hand of the Amorite with my sword and my bow.
Yeah, who are the Amorites?
The Amorites were the people that were living in the land
of Canaan.
That they were the people living in the land of Canaan when Israel conquered Canaan, when they left Egypt.
Okay.
Right.
So when was that?
That was after the Exodus.
So what you're saying is he didn't have.
No.
That is what you're saying, or no, that's not.
What I'm saying is, can you think of a single narrative up till now where Jacob went to war with anybody?
No.
Of course not. Okay. Who did go to war with the Amorites?
I have no idea.
Israel, the nation of Israel.
Okay.
So again, we have another future reference.
Okay, so when you said no, you meant yes, you are correct.
What?
To me.
I don't. Apparently, I lost the plot of what you're saying. I have no idea anymore.
I want to make sure I'm right.
What I'm saying is that Jacob didn't go to war with anybody. This clearly is not about Jacob.
Okay.
This is another future reference about the nation of Israel going to war with the Amorites, just like we read in the conquest narratives.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's definitely written after the Exodus. And there's another really interesting clue here, because it says, moreover, I have given to you one portion above your brothers, which I took from the hand of the Amorites with my sword and my bow. Okay. So here, Jacob Israel is personifying himself as the nation of Israel. And he says, I'm giving you a portion above your brothers, meaning the portion that's going to Ephraim and Manasseh is greater than the portion going to the other brothers. And there's a secondary interpretation. You could even say that when it says above your brothers, that he's referring to north. Now, if that wasn't enough, if that wasn't enough, the word for portion, when it says I've given you a portion, is not the usual word for portion that shows up in the Old Testament. The word for portion that is used is literally shakam, which is the same root word as Shechem, which is the capital city of the northern tribes, the capital city of Ephraim and Manasseh. So it's a play on words.
Oh.
I'm saying he said, I'm giving you a portion.
So other parts of the Bible use the word portion, but they use a different word?
Yeah, the typical word for portion, there's two different words for portion. There's like a portion of land and a portion of food. And a portion of land is typically like chalak, and a portion of food is like manah. So when we see the word Shechem here, basically, one has to wonder, like, what's it doing here? Because the Shechem is typically referred to as like a cut, like a cut of a shoulder, like a shoulder portion.
Okay.
Right? It's a really weird thing to say that I've given you a portion, referring to a land, but it really be referring to like a cut of a shoulder meat.
So whoever wrote this was kind of like winking to the audience?
Yeah, whoever was writing this is giving a play on words and is winking to the northern tribes, right? And Shechem, as I said, was the capital city of the northern tribes under their very first king, the most famous king, Jeroboam. So when the kingdom split after Solomon, had Rehoboam in the south and Jeroboam in the north, Jeroboam made his capital city Shechem. And we read in 1 Kings 12:25, then Jeroboam built Shechem in the mountains of Ephraim, and he dwelt there, and he went out there and built Penuel, which is another city. So according to the historical narrative, Shechem is the primary city. Underneath their most famous king, Jeroboam. Underneath their most famous tribe, Ephraim. All of which this entire chapter has been propping up. The entire chapter has been propping up Ephraim, Shechem, and the northern tribes. It's all political, the whole chapter.
So did any of this, I mean, would you say any of this happen? Do you know what I mean? I mean, did this happen, but then they, added some things to make it lean more toward the north? Or is this whole thing just a fantasy? I don't know.
I don't know either because, and I wrote some notes on this too, because it's not always so clear, because Shechem is also given as a city of refuge, right? So we see now this is in 1 Chronicles 6. It says some of the families of the sons of Kohath were given cities as their territory from the tribe of Ephraim. And then it says, and they gave them of the cities of refuge Shechem with its common lands in the mountains of Ephraim, also Gezer and its common land. So that's 1 Chronicles. And then we see a parallel passage in Joshua 27-9. It says, so they set apart Kadesh in Galilee, in the hill country of Naphtali, Shechem in the hill country of Ephraim, and Kiriath Arba, that is in Hebron. So we've got a bunch of, initially, these sanctuary cities in Ephraim, including Shechem. So it seems to be saying that we've got these really important cities in the north. But then, in the book of Joshua, it then goes on to list the sanctuary cities of the south. Like there's one in Judah, like in Hebron, right? So some of the narratives, it's hard to tell if they've got a pro-Judah twist or a pro-Israel twist or somewhere in between, or if it's just a mix of narratives and you have to kind of suss them all out. But the narrative that we're reading right now in Genesis, as far as I can tell, is basically describing why the northern kingdom is the way it is and why they're so awesome.
Right. Yeah. What I don't get is why they would use the play on words. And that kind of drawing attention to the fact that it's might happen.
Well, kind of. So here's what Richard Elliott Friedman has to say about this kind of stuff. So a lot of these narratives, if they came from the Elohist and the priestly source, a lot of it was not assembled at the time period that we might think so. A lot of them were probably assembled later, like after the Assyrian conquest in the late 8th century, early 6th century or 7th century. And when the Assyrians wiped out the northern tribes, a lot of them actually went south into Judah, and they combined with Judeans. And that included all the priestly class. The priestly class from the northern tribes, the ones that wrote most of this narrative, a lot of them immigrated south into Judah so that they didn't get killed in the war.
Okay.
And then what do? They have to find jobs there. They have to find a place to fit in. They have to integrate into society, right? So as they took on jobs, being priests in Judah, and some of them being scribes in Judah, and they at some point get tasked with integrating the text of all of the history of Israel and Judah. What do? They smuggle in some things as kind of a wink and a nod to their own people group. You can't outright say it because you're among them now. You're right. The call is coming from within the house. You know what I mean?
Right.
But you don't want to abandon your people's narrative or your version of the narrative altogether. So you smuggle it in with a wink and a nod. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's my theory. That's my working theory, which why we have priestly sources that seem to be propping up the northern kingdom, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But not obviously.
Right.
They're trying to like slip it in. So, I don't know.
Got it.
That's all I have to say about that.
Even less. I had like no notes on this one.
I know you did not like this chapter.
Yeah. No, I was just, it's so obvious. And yet
you just thought it was very straightforward.
That's right, I did.
I read this and I was like, oh my, the whole damn narrative is nothing but a political document.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the next chapter is the same. The next chapter is very political.
Well, at least I wrote a lot about it.
You did. You wrote a lot about it. We're going to have a lot to say.
Nice. I'm looking forward to that.
All right. So I think that's all we have to say about this chapter.
Yeah.
It was a short chapter.
Yeah, it was a terrible chapter.
Oh, Pace is here. Good to see you, Pace.
Oh, yeah.
Pace is live in our chat. So anyways, that's the end of the chapter. Thanks for being here. We had a lot of side quests.
Sure did.
They were fun side quests, weren't they?
Some.
There's some. Okay. Next week, let's just finish the book.
You mean that? Oh, but we're doing 49.
No, we're definitely not.
Are you kidding me?
It's 8:30 at night.
So what? It's only 8:30.
I'm going to bed.
You are not going to
I'm
bed.
an old man.
What am I supposed to do? Just go home early now?
You're married with a cat.
Married with a cat.
You got to go take care of your family.
Oh, are you kidding? We could have talked forever about this stuff.
I know we could, but if we start the next chapter, we're going to be here till midnight.
I don't care.
I got to work in the morning.
I got to work in the afternoon.
Uh-huh.
I'm working in the afternoon.
I'm waking up at 6:30 in the morning.
I'm going to wake up at 11 as well.
I promise you, next week we'll finish the entire book.
Why do I think that's not true?
That's going to happen. You already got one chapter finished. All you got to do is finish the last chapter. Last chapter is pretty easy, actually.
Uh-huh.
And I already read your notes for this chapter, and I've already read the text for this coming chapter.
Yeah.
So it won't take me long to jot down my notes.
Yeah, whatever.
So we'll finish Genesis out next week, and then we'll start doing Exodus. Exodus is just a bundle of fun.
Yeah, well, after that, we're going to take a week to look at Genesis again and see what all the questions,
We got to do a mega recap on that.
And we'll do a mailbag.
Yeah, we should do a mailbag.
Since nobody asked us any questions, I'll just make them up.
Actually, what I'll do is for our mailbag week, maybe I'll just broadcast it. I'll broadcast it beforehand. I'll advertise it. There you go. So I'll advertise for it on the TikToks and let everyone know that we're going to be doing an open mailbag to come and ask questions.
That would be fun, wouldn't it?
And we'll drag a bunch of people from TikTok over.
Okay, and I'll use a bunch of my alternate accounts.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
To make it look like there's actually people here.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah, why not?
All right. Well, I guess I'll go home early. Weird, but
we're on time. It's dark outside now. Look at it.
Yeah. It's coming to winter.
All right. Thanks for being here, guys. We'll see you again in a week. We're going to crush the next 2 chapters into 1 week, and then we're going to do a follow-up on Genesis. Then we're going to start going through Exodus. So we only got, like another 30 years before we finish the Bible?
Yeah, probably longer, man.
I'm going to have to start eating healthier if we're going to do this for another 30 years.
I mean, Genesis took 1 year, and there are 66 books. So
it's going to be a while.
Right, yeah.
And just wait till we get to Chronicles.
I just can't wait till we get to Leviticus, because that's your baby.
I'm
going to go crazy.
I love me some Leviticus.
I am going to go crazy on that one.
Nobody likes Leviticus, but it's one of the most entertaining books of the Bible.
Yeah.
It has everything. I mean, incest, adultery, drugs, magic, abortions. I mean, everything's in there. No, abortions is numbers. But, I mean, everything else is in there. Animal sacrifice, endless barbecue. I mean, what's there not to love?
So many things.
Slavery is there. I mean, there's everything. Everything's in there. The year of Jubilee's in there.
Oh, you know what? I actually do like that one.
The year of Jubilee's awesome.
It really is.
Yeah, chapter 25.
They should do that for now.
Yeah, the Leviticus is cool. We're going to love it. All right, hey guys, we're going to not ramble on any longer. Thank you for being here.
We can. We have another hour.
We could, but we're not.
Fine. Just go to bed, old man.
All right. Have a great